Okay, Jake, thank you for coming on to the security space. Interesting topic today. We'll be doing being a CISO in a world that is obsessed with AI and Chat GPT. So before we get into it, are you okay just to give the audience just a little bit of an update to yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jay Bernadez. Thanks for having me, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel like this is a topic we talk about, and it's all I've ever talked about for the last 6 months, so I'm interested to get into it. But no, as a background for myself, I'm currently the VP of Security, IT, and Acting CISO at Whistic, which is a company doing a lot with AI to disrupt the kind of vendor risk management space, how you deal with supply chains, how you assess your risks, how you respond to companies trying to send you questionnaires and ask you your security posture and profile. Prior to that, I was the CISO at Single Store, then called MemSQL, a database company. And prior to that, I spent a number of years, best part of a decade, in consulting roles, ranging from technical pen testing to social engineering to GRC type work to vCISO work. I've worked pretty much all over the world, the Middle East, the Far East, the US, the UK, Europe wide, South America. I've probably been most places now. So I like to feel I know something about a lot or a lot about a few things.
Very good way of putting it. So hopefully, in that vast knowledge, we'll be able to, get somewhere with this topic. Because I feel like whenever you bring AI or ChatGPT into something, you can go down an absolute chasm. So,
Yeah.
start this off then. In terms of AI, like you say, it's an absolute explosion at the moment. Obviously, it's not new. It has been around for a while, but why now is it just even getting into the mainstream? Obviously, we know that it's been in security and development for a while, but why now is it blowing up? What's the reason?
I think it's ChatGPT appearing in commercial and kind of end consumer hands suddenly. We knew this was coming, we knew it was happening, but it dropped in a way that I don't think anyone expected it, even the kind of Silicon Valley world where I spent most of my career. People didn't see it coming with the rapidity that it did or growing as quickly as it did. And it's got a novelty effect, right? It's like the first time the PlayStation dropped or the first time that social media came. It's got that kind of social ripple effect where someone talks about it and says, I use this, and someone else uses it, someone else uses it. And you start to get that kind of growth through it where it starts to hockey stick. The reality is there's a lot of misconceptions, right? There is, firstly, is it even generative? Not really. It's aggregative. So yes, it can generate content, but it's generating content from existing knowledge. If you try and give it a new problem that's never been talked about before, it pretty much crashes and burns. It has no idea what it's doing. Secondly, how accurate is it? The reality is not that accurate. If you go to OpenAI and ask them, if you give it a sub data source that basically says, this is the data I want you to talk to, it'll probably pull about 35 to 45% accuracy. And the reality behind that is because it's aggregative. It's taking averages in reality. So you pull it across a mass data source and say, build me a template for an essay on the American Civil War. No problem, right? There is so much information in the wide web about the American Civil War that it can pull a pretty consistent thing together that sounds new, it sounds interesting, it sounds clever, but it's not. It's taking sources, pulling them, taking averages and building out sentence structures based on what it thinks it knows already, based on what it found. But if you turn around and say, find me all of the history you can on Nick Whittle, right? There's not a lot about you on the internet. So when it goes to averages, I don't have to do a lot to skew it. I've only got to write in a few places, Nick is a Leicester fan. Or you're probably not, I don't know, right? But if I write that
through and through.
If I write that in 5 different sources, it'll take that as the average. If I then write that Nick is a Man United fan in 10 different places, well, the average has got skewed to being a Man United fan. So right now, ChatGPT says you're a Man United fan. Like, the reality is you can quickly take it and twist it. And I think that's one of the most interesting concepts when we talk about security. Everyone thinks now ChatGPT, and I know I'm rambling, so stop me if you want to go in a different kind of line. No. But everyone thinks ChatGPT and they think phishing. The first thought is act as, right? And you can do some cool stuff. I can say act as me. I can feed it all the information about me, my social media presence, which is basically non-existent, but everything you can find about me online. And it will start to write in the style that I write and start to use English idioms, start to use context about how I see the world or how I see security. And it then can craft pretty solid phishing emails from that. And it can hit with a rapidity and a volume that I can't possibly, I suppose, mimic as a human. So that's interesting. But what's more interesting is when you take it as a source of truth. So say you go back to Wikipedia, right? I don't know if you ever knew, but I lived in China for a while. If you go on Wikipedia, the limited sources you're allowed in China, you will find that actually it's rewritten part of the history. So there are Chinese wars that never happened. There are Chinese involvements in wars that never happened. There is Taiwan and Hong Kong, which officially were always Chinese, even when Hong Kong, before it was actually Chinese. They rewrote history because they controlled the rhetoric. And that's the real scary thing about ChatGPT. We inherently, as humans, we like to trust, we like to believe. How many people go, have you heard this? And their basis for that announcement is the Daily Mail News, or the fact they read it on Facebook, or the fact they read it on Instagram. Who fact checks anymore? And so if I feed ChatGPT with a different discourse about society, about politics, about race, about gender, about ethnicity, about sexuality, I can actually start to polarize and divide society. Now, in doing so, that's the real danger. Yeah. Feeding ChatGPT a different source, and it's not hard. Like if you go back and look at some of this stuff, like the MML models, like go to Tay, Microsoft's one that they built, which became a racist. Like it didn't take very long. And that's staggering. That's partly terrifying, partly impressive that it managed to generate itself from one political ideology to another one quite quickly. But that's the truth. By when people like me say that ChatGPT is dangerous from a security perspective, it's actually not using it as a vehicle or as a weapon to attack things. It's more the fact that that could completely tear society in half in the same way that the fake news of social media did in numerous elections or social discourses of the last 2 or 3 years.
So how is I suppose we're more delving into the realms of sociology here, but let's go for it. Like obviously when mass media sort of like broke out, like and like the printing press, like well, obviously was there not fears then that like or the media controlling society? Is this not the modern day flash? I'll say it, flash in the pan. Do you think it's just a flash in the pan where it's just like, oh, this thing could overtake society, and then do you think common sense will prevail, or do you think it's a little bit different to that?
All right, let's go back in history then. So the biggest fear when the printing press came to play was the ideological or religious education of the common man. The fact that among others, the Catholic Church, but it depends where you are in the world, controlled discourse. They basically said, this is how you get to heaven. And the biggest fear was that a Bible that had already been written in Latin was suddenly written in English and accessible to common people. There's a great book called Book of Fire about William Tyndale and about how he actually influenced kind of the way that society moved. Right, so that was terrifying for them because it suddenly meant that they couldn't control with the ideology that said that no one else can read. So if we tell them what's in the book, they'll do what they're told to do. Does this have a similar vein to it? Maybe. It's allowing people to access to refurnish and to republish content that they don't necessarily understand. So it's allowing people to present essays typically that are more intelligent than they are and use concepts they probably don't understand. And so there is a chance there to have political and social debate in a more dangerous context because it gives people effectively the backup, the evidence to support an argument that they don't necessarily have to have looked into too deeply. And that's nerve-wracking. Is it a flash in the pan? AI, no. AI is here to stay, right? We cannot run away from it. We cannot security people say it's dangerous. We cannot say, as I think Elon Musk hopes he can say, just shut it off and it will be fine. It's here to stay. We opened Pandora's box. And the reality is we have to find a way to live with it, to secure it, to leverage it, and do so in the right ways. But I think ChatGPT's novelty value will go away. I mean, its main purpose at the moment is writing essays for academics, and people are smartening up to that already pretty sharply to the colleges and universities. So I think that kind of goes away to a degree. I think at the moment people started using it a lot for work. There's a lot of people who are a bit more anti that. You probably saw that Samsung banned it among all employees because they had accountants and other people basically putting financially sensitive data into it for modeling purposes, writing reports. And then someone else suddenly found out what Samsung's financial forecasts were. Similarly, like I'll let my guys use it for anything which is nonchalant, right? Doesn't really matter. They're writing a structure for a presentation, or they're writing a report on vendor risk management or the state of security. But if they say they want to use it for like our finances, I say there's no chance, right? You're not putting that into an open source model. So I think those kind of things have already hit the peak and are starting to drop off. But AI is not going anywhere. Everywhere I look in Silicon Valley and in my world right now, everyone is asking the same question. What can we do with this?
Yep.
And when can we do it?
That leads perfectly into my next question. So obviously, like bringing it back into the world of security, then, obviously AI, ChatGPT. Talk to me about how it can benefit your teams? Obviously, is it literally that's it? You I suppose let's look at it on the benefits from the time being. Are we not wasting a fantastic tool by just using it for nonchalant things? Or I suppose that's just chat GPT, AI we can leverage to much greater capacity. But in terms of being a CISO managing a team in a security company, what are some of the benefits that you can now leverage from this?
Let's differentiate three things, right? ChatGPT is a commercially available version of OpenAI's AI mass machine learning model, right? So let's take that as a separate thing. You can't build that in your product. You can't license it. You can't use it. It's completely open source knowledge base. That means anything you put into it is absorbed into OpenAI, feeds the model, and builds the future of the model effectively, right? Second stage is OpenAI has OpenAI APIs that you can use their technology, but you can back-end it with your own data sources, meaning that anything that goes into it does not get absorbed and consumed by OpenAI. So that means that you can say to your customers, that data resides with us, we protect it, we secure it, don't worry, it's not going to turn up somewhere in Russia or China tomorrow being queried by somebody else. Then the last thing says, we're always talking about ChatGPT and OpenAI. There are a lot of these models. There are a lot of these applications coming out. OpenAI has simply got the first kind of advantage. They're not the only one. So there's differentiations in that. In terms of what can we do with it, I think there's a question of what we do with it as a CISO internally, what we do with it as Whistic as a product, and what the industry does with it as a whole. So the word algorithm has been flowing around for a long, long time. But what it actually means, most people don't understand. But what it effectively means is that you can bake something, which means you can take a principle that says that I want you to understand what I do and teach me the anomalies inside of what I should normally do versus what is happening. So kind of things like Lacework, Orca, Wiz, these kind of cloud security platforms work off of this principle. And that effectively is a degree of AI. It's machine learning. It's a capability that says that if I keep looking at something enough, I learn what the anomalies or the abnormalities are, and I notify or alert on those. Now, the sharper we get with the use of AI and various other security products, the better we can get at effectively catching things quicker and catching things or securing things tighter. I don't need to worry as much if it knows every single possible opportunity I've got to be normal and only spots things outside of that. So internally, I've got a lot of options. From a Whistic perspective, so we work in vendor risk, and our main two issues are two things, or three things. Let me go to third last. But one direction, you now have a supply chain. If you look at the average tech company or the average company full stop, I would hazard a guess that they're at least 60 up to 80% pure SaaS based. And if you look at us, we're probably 95%. I've got one server, it serves Wi-Fi endpoints in our office in Salt Lake, that's it. Everything else is SaaS. That's hyper connected, hyper complicated. There is data moved through AI, through API points all over the place, much of which is subject to regulation, much of which is commercially sensitive, much of which is customer sensitive. Now, what we do is say, okay, you need to get security around that because most breaches now happen in your supply chain. So you have a platform and we automate that so you can send questionnaires out and allow people to respond to them. And the other side of that is, say I'm the one getting questioned. I want to sell my product to Goldman Sachs. They're going to send me a security questionnaire of 600 questions. I don't have time to fill it in. I'm going to build what we call the Whistic profile. And the profile effectively looks like a kind of a LinkedIn page for your business. Here's the questionnaires I've answered. Here's my policies. Here's my pen testing. Here's my documents. Here's my certifications. And it can effectively give you all the answers you need to your questionnaire before I answer it. So it's proactive. So we're kind of taking both sides. Ask the people, help the people respond. Now, when we look at AI, we say there's major steps in there that we can now automate. Creating a profile right now is like curating a LinkedIn profile. You have to build it. You have to do something with it. What if you can take all of your documentation, your profiles, your policies, your attestations, your audits, your whatever it is, right? Throw it at a URL into a model and have it build a profile for you. All right? Yep. Finger click, done. What if then, rather than sending a questionnaire to ask, you can take your questionnaire in .csv format or in an API for another application, or just in a set of questions that you wrote down in a Word document, throw it at that profile, answers. Generated from the back end, from a knowledge base, it's pulling and answering your questions. But what if you can do that? So that takes this problem of having to assess vendors and respond to assessments and makes it finger click fast. Yep. We've always talked about how we took days and weeks into hours. We're now talking about taking hours into minutes, into seconds, and taking out this whole problem altogether. Now, the other part of that is we're nicely placed as a brand who focuses on vendor risk to say everyone is a little bit nervous about AI. It's fair to say. So there is an AI standard, ISO 23053, I believe, if I've got that right, which is actually focused on AI security. Now, we're building a questionnaire that will release very soon inside of our platform to allow you to ask your vendors about what they're doing with AI and get comfortable at how they're working with AI. Because again, as you point out, and you identify completely correctly, most people don't understand what they're asking. They'll ask about ChatGPT, and I say, that's great. I can't use ChatGPT. It's not in my product. OpenAI's API is, but that's me controlling the data. You giving it to me securing, me controlling it. I'm just using the technology inside the model. The data isn't going to OpenAI. They're very different things, and most people don't understand the concepts around those. So there's a lot that we can do in our product. There's a lot that we can do as an industry. There's a lot that we can do as professionals to kind of get comfortable with AI because it isn't going away.
Yep. So when it comes to AI and these things like, phishing or maybe sort of like any sort of breaches, then do you think that there's going to be a rise in these sort of incidents, or do you think no, we'll be able to actually leverage AI to actually reduce the impact of that? What's your thought on which side of the fence are you that?
I think there's lots of ways that you can pull that, and it takes a bit of unpicking. I think theoretically the use of AI and security tools should reduce the amount of breaches because you'll be able to secure tighter, spot anomalies, and allow correct things to pass through doors more frequently and in a more transparent way. So I think that's good. But at the same time, adding AI adds complexity and adds layers, and therefore increases the attack surface that you can go after. Because like I said, it's a commonly misunderstood and very complicated piece of engineering, which means that it has vectors that most people won't be able to understand and properly defend against. What I think is more important when we talk data breaches and AI is complexity. If I've got AI built in and AI happens to be the attack vector of choice for whatever that kind of breach or attack was, it's going to be very hard for me to reverse out and find out what happened. It's going to be very hard to work out what happened. And like I said, if you point then to what's the breach, right? It's very hard to look at what is a breach if you're feeding a model which is pulling back data which is completely within its rights to feed and to deliver. It's not really a breach, it's just a complete misconfiguration. But the other thing is, I think you'll see more breaches here of misdirection, persuasion, almost like the anti-honeypot. The fact that AI could feed back stuff which is dangerous. And then that brings us to another point, right? If you talk about data breaches, it's not even just about a breach, but product malfunctions. I've said a lot, we'll get, and I said openly, we'll get Whistic to be able to query it with using our OpenAI APIs or other machine learning APIs. You'll throw a questionnaire at it, it'll respond back from the knowledge base of, I don't know, Okta's one of our, Okta or whoever it might be, or maybe it's whatever customer we choose today, right? And it'll respond back and give you data back. Now, what if it's wrong? What if the data it gives you based on the fact that it's not 100% accuracy is wrong? So for us, the big challenge is to make sure that we train and articulate both the model and the message to our customers and the users of that product, that this is what it will do. This is how accurate it is. Until we get to 100% accuracy, there's always going to be that element of us which is going to be slightly nervous and say, look, you have to understand that this is a learning process. This is not going to be 100% correct every time. And that's terrifying for someone who's working in the regulatory space as we are. We have to make sure before we put it out commercially that we are comfortable that it is both secure, but more importantly, that it's accurate.
Well, being a CISO, then, like, are you not worried in the sense of like, if we promote like AI as this great tool, do you not think psychologically we're gonna, because sorry, let me bring it back. So one of the, a common theme throughout a lot of these podcasts that we've done is human error being a cause and a cure. By really promoting AI and being its fan, do you not think we are naturally just going to be like, we'll switch off and start using our initiative less and less and less, and that's actually one of our greatest advantages over the computers. Do you not think that could be a risk? And do you think it's down to you as a CISO to keep your staff fully sort of like sharp, we being like, look, still we need to be on this?
So I think there's two layers to that. I think part of me says we're already at the point where we're lazy. We rely on SaaS tools to do stuff we could actually do anyway. And there is some degree of automation, some speed, some improvements from that. But sometimes I think we just buy for the sake of buying. We have an almost fraternity-like approach to things in the tech world, specifically in the tech world, that says that they're using that, so we should probably use that too. Before you evaluate, do I actually need it? Do I get benefit from it? So I think that's true. But I think the other side of the coin is to say, well, actually, if you can automate out the stuff which is mundane and maybe very easy, you can take the intellect you've got of your staff and focus them on doing the hard bits more. So you go back, like, look at, like, I don't know, Manchester in the Victorian times and the cotton mills. Right? Originally, you've got people doing all of the work. Massively high risk of life. Very inefficient. Not a great way to do things, full stop. You then have mechanization and automation. Well, until a very long time, when it's to do with the cost of labor internationally, for a very long time, we didn't see the falling apart of the cotton mills. We saw that people were focused into higher skill jobs that improved and accelerated things, if anything. And I'm a believer and advocate in that you can automate out the stuff that, yes, people could do. Is the margin for error that important? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But I can allocate the people to doing the stuff where it's really hard and where right now we don't spend enough time. Let's talk about shifting left and getting security into development. Let's talk about privacy by design. Let's talk about not just remediating vulnerabilities from your vulnerability management platform, but understanding how they got there and changing the practices in the future to mean that they don't come in there again. Let's talk about how you build. Let's talk about understanding your SBOM, right? Your software bill of materials. Let's talk about understanding those third-party open source libraries you put in, how to maintain currency of them, what they mean for your application from a security stance. Let's get people now who have that time, because we can automate away a part of their job, to do things which are much harder that right now are laying by the wayside because they don't have time to do them. And those are the things that are keep me up at night. Ask any CISO what scares you, and they will tell you open source vulnerabilities from third-party components of my product inside of my code base. And very few of them are doing very much about it. Because every time they say you need to maintain or remove that, engineering will say it'll break everything. Yeah. But I don't have the time or the resources for my guys to go and properly analyze and articulate the solution to that statement.
Okay. So what does the future hold then? Should I be worried? Where are we sort of going with this absolute confusion that is AI?
I think there's two places again. I know I often say there's two sides of the coin, but I think this is really one of them. So I think on a technology side, we're going to work it out, right? The reality is, I mean, it's interesting, and I don't mean to slander anyone, but like we do some work with OpenAI. And when I asked to speak to OpenAI's head of security, they said you can't. And I said, that's unusual. Like, what do you mean he won't speak to me? And they said, no, we haven't got one. In fact, we don't really have a security team. So at that point, they really didn't have anything in place, which is terrifying when you think about what the product really does and all the concerns it has. So we have a lot of work to do in the AI space to get the technology to the levels that we want it to be, and also to back end that with proper security, compliance, and privacy. There's all kinds of GDPR concerns on the data that sits inside of those models, not just OpenAI, but all the other ones as well. So I think that we'll get there with the tech. We'll make this work because it's now too late not to. I don't buy into regulation turning it off. I don't think it can ever happen. I think that it's now too important and too powerful a tool. You'll also see that what happens here is if you go to the media, it becomes an important factor, right? You go back to the 60s. Why do people smoke? Because adverts told them that smoking was healthy. They were still coughing their lungs up the same as someone would today, but adverts told them that smoking was healthy. So we've got the same problem. If you go onto YouTube, you'll find countless videos saying Elon Musk wants to ban ChatGPT. Do you know why the man wants to help you ban ChatGPT? Because it could make your business 15 times faster than it currently is, right? You see all this kind of very inflammatory, very clickbait-esque content. That isn't going away. So if we try and regulate and try and ban it, people will just see it as a social movement to control their ability to succeed and to grow, and they'll use it anyway. Right, so we have to get a way to make it work for the best possible version and secure it and build it and control it in the best possible way. What does it hold socially outside of technology companies? You know what? I've got no idea. And that's the scary one. Like you go to Facebook, I left social media a number of years ago when there was that whole period of time when we went through kind of race debates, gender debates, transgender debates, sexuality debates, political divides, both here and across the pond, and the amount of fake realities that were put forward. I've talked on a lot of these podcasts before about one specific story that always interested me. When my wife, on the way to an airport, my wife sent me a message saying, like, you're going to struggle because all the passport gates, remember the passport gates went on strike? Sent me this picture from the Daily Mail News. I said, that's fantastically interesting, but the strike hasn't started yet. So why is there a picture of queues and an average time when there's no one actually on strike? Also, that passport gate is not from Heathrow Airport. And sadly, I know the passport gate at Heathrow Airport very well to look at. That's actually from Manchester Airport, and that's a check-in desk. So not only is that story completely inaccurate, but they've also sourced it with completely wrong or intentionally misleading and fake images. Now, I think that's the danger of AI in the future. The fact that we as people now rely on snippets and headlines. No one reads the article. They read the top bit, right? They read the synopsis at very best. And that means we're trusting news to be accurate. And the reality is news is getting less accurate. And if we're taking our source from ChatGPT or from other models, again, I don't always talk about them, well, we don't even control that. That's not controlled or regulated. Like I said, if I feed it enough times that you're an idiot and ask the question, is Nick an idiot? The average will say, yes, Nick is an idiot. Like that's the truth, right? And that's a terrifying future. If people believe anything they read on the internet is a source of truth, but that source of truth is controllable, is malleable, is not fact-checked at the back end, then you can change it. Like I said, Tay was the best example. Tay became a racist. And there's no reason that every other model... Yeah, there's no reason that every other model can't follow the same pattern. And so I don't worry for what we do in the tech world, because I think we can use the technology in the product to help our products perform better and to change society. I'm a massive advocate and evangelist of the fact that eventually we'll make things work, because we always do in tech. But I'm scared for people who inherently trust these products without the knowledge of the realities behind them. And in the short and long term, what that means. You've already got people who will take it, write an essay from it. We've got smart in the colleges to catch those. So they run it through an anti-Chat GPT, but that will mess up the accuracy. So they run it back through Chat GPT, then back through an anti. And they'll do this like 5 different cycles and then submit it. It might not get caught, but like, do they really know what they just said? Like, do they really know what they just supported? Do they know what they just did to the model from a future stance? Because they've tweaked history so many times in those iterations. Do they now know what they've done to the back end for the next person who asks the same question? Like, I think that's the thing that scares me most is, what does the future hold for tech? We will make AI automate mundane and manual processes to allow technologists and security people to focus on more important and better tasks to change how we live in the way that we always have. What does AI mean for the whole of society? I've got no idea, but my guess is it leads to more division, more contention, less regulation because there simply isn't a knowledge of these things at government, and more argument. And again, I know I'm off topic, but if you come to the interesting point here is there's historically been this issue between technology and policy. Bruce Schneier talks about it a lot as an author, particularly in Click Here to Kill Everybody, which is a great book, a plug for anyone who wants to read it. And he says that until you unite them, you've got a massive problem, because technologists don't trust government because they think that they just confine them from doing anything. Government doesn't trust technologists because they think that they're trying to break the status quo, the common society. Here you've got people who don't want to dumb down what they're doing. And here you've got people who might be great policymakers, great politicians, but I've never met a technologist in politics or in kind of policy making who understood the tech that underpinned the things they were making policies about. And that terrifying in itself. You need to get these two united. When you look at opening a Pandora's box like AI, like ChatGPT and the other AI models, you need to make sure that governments understand what is this and what isn't this. What should we do? What shouldn't we do? And I think that is key and fundamental for the future of this thing being effective in society at large, is those two uniting and making it work. But we've not seen that happen yet, so I do not hold my breath.
Jake, I wish we had more time, but unfortunately that is our time today. But no, you've put together a really, really interesting argument there, where I think it'll spark quite a bit of debate. So if anybody's got any questions for Jake, I'll be sure to obviously put his information as well as Whistic's into the comment section of this video below. But once again, Jake, thanks so much for jumping on the security space.
Thanks, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure. Love being here.